Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our retreat. Excuse me one second. Talk through my computer. Is it going to come out of there? Could we turn off the owl completely? Good.
No, you're muted.
Ready? No. Ready? Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our board retreat. We are going to be doing a conversation and training around race. There will be an opportunity to make public comment in a minute. But first, we're going to do our welcome procedures. If Dr. Hurst, could you please take roll call? Present.
Good morning, everyone. Present.
Trustee Christian. Good morning. Present. Trustee Redwood is absent. Trustee Phillips is absent. Trustee, both trustees are absent.
Thank you, Dr. Hurst. Okay, now we're going to do our Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now to a land acknowledgement. We recognize that we are presently on the lands of the Chochenyo, Muwekma, Karkan, Ohlone peoples, and acknowledge them as the first inhabitants of the land we currently occupy. Excuse us one second.
Among these books are a series of manga titles that have additional volumes have been added to the title, including Bleach and One Piece.
Yay, congratulations. Frankie.
Brought in with the dismissal at 1:30 p.m. Plan accordingly. On to sport. Today, group tennis faced off against La Candela in the sport. Probably for Norco section, single the double tournament. And girls have to play the belt together and 6 p.m. Performance coming for the State University team will be between tournament with the 11 p.m. through 11:45 a.m. You can call in the rear center with questions. Once the announcement, please email your announcement to Mr. Call. Remember to advertise your service. Have a nice day or bye.
Okay, thank you so much. So that was our students from Richmond High School doing their morning announcements. Thank you, Richmond High, for hosting us today. Now we're going to move to our public comment. Ms. Cornejo, Ms. Munoz, do we have any public comment?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to pull up my agenda. Okay, board, for agenda review and adoption, if there are no objections, we'll adopt the agenda as is. Wonderful, so adopted. And now we're gonna move to our main and only item for today, which is our equity training. And I'm gonna pass it to our facilitator, who is Dr. Rochelle Rogers-Ard, who has been doing work with us in the district for the last 6 months. And we thank her for doing this, so I'll pass it on to her. Let me meet. Yes. Oh, yes, and then we can unmute the owl now. Now, yeah, sorry.
Good morning. Happy to be here and happy to be sharing with the board. Super excited about this work. I'm Rochelle Rogers-Ard, and I am doing work to help ensure that we are moving our district forward on our journey towards anti-racism. And so today I'll be working with the board, but having part of the work is meeting with central office leaders, meeting with principals, meeting with students. And so creating an opportunity to do this work across the district is part of the work this year. But today, excited to be with the school board. So wanted to just say that these screens, this is proprietary screens and slides, but screenshots are okay. Please take care of yourselves. My labor and body recognition, acknowledging that the burden of environmental degradation and exploitation and systemic injustice falls solely upon the labor of Black and brown bodies in the building of this country and its institutions. I remember that Black and brown people were born and died working this land against their will for generations. I also acknowledge the continued contribution of the labor of survivors over the centuries to today of all immigrant labor, including voluntary and voluntary trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples in the building of what we refer to as the United States. So in order to build community, for those of us in the room, I'm wondering if you could share your first name and its meaning, and the person or persons for whom you were named, and then one hope you have for our anti-racism work at the board level.
Would you like to start?
Yeah, I guess I can start. My name is Othary Christian, and you asked what's the meaning of my name?
Yes.
Othary is, I was named after my dad, and all I know, my dad came from Texas, East Texas, and so so that's where he got the name. I don't know what the meaning of it is, but I just know I'm named after my father.
I love it. What's one hope that you have?
One hope that I have is that we can eradicate or, really build cohesiveness in our district.
Thank you. Call on the next person.
Trustee Smith.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamila Maisha. Jamila means beautiful. Maisha means living or life. My father wanted to name me, or my mother wanted to name me Beautiful Flower. So she wanted to name me Jamila Kamaria. My dad said, no, in this country, she needs to have a beautiful life. So he named me Jamila Maisha. One hope you have for anti-racism work at the board level, we set the tone. So if we can get it right and tight here, then it flows like a river. And then we will be able to see active anti-racism policy in our district, and we can hold those all the way down the stream accountable. I'm complete. Demetrio?
Thank you for that. My name is Demetrio Gonzalez Hoy. The meaning of my name has like many random meanings, but I was really named after my dad, who was named after his grandfather. So it's just a family name that's been passed on. One hope I have for the work of the board, I think similar to what my colleagues have shared, I think that in order for us to really go after racism in our district, I believe it has to be done in like a sandwich approach, which is we're supporting the people on the ground and pushing them to do the anti-racist work, but it also has to come from the top at the same time. Otherwise, I don't think that it can be done appropriately. So I think that we lead by example, and I think that we have to set that tone, as President Rose mentioned. So my hope is that we're able to do that part, do our part in that work. Even if it also means having very difficult conversations with each other. I'll pass it on to Dr. Hurst.
Thank you so much. My first name is actually Kenneth, which I don't go by. My middle name is Christian. My first name means handsome.
Oh.
I had to throw that out there. My middle name means Christ-like. So, handsome Christian. There you go.
That's
I don't
gonna
know
come
who I
back,
was
that's gonna
named
come back
after.
later.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I hope that I have, for this work at the board level, just listening to our board members, I agree 100%. But I would also add, I've always been a big believer around clear expectations. So really, and what I've shared from the board, with the board from inception when I first got here was, I really want clear expectations from the board level. Here's what we want our district to be. Here's what we want you to do in implementation. So really looking for some clear direction from the board in this area.
Phenomenal. Who were you calling?
Also,
I'm Rosa Cornejo. First, Rosa Matilde Cornejo. I was named after both my grandmothers from my mom and my dad's side. My hope is that we, like Dr. Hurst says, that we get clear direction from our board members.
so I missed the second part of her name. You said.
No, you didn't.
What happened? Did I miss something? Is it an inside joke? Okay, okay. Who are you calling on, Rosa?
Genesis.
Hello, everyone. My name's Genesis, and the meaning of my name is the first book in the Bible, but it was also, my parents named me that because it was the beginning of their life, right? Yeah, I'm the oldest, so I was their first child. A hope that I have is that we can all get along.
Wow. Hi, thanks so much for participating in that. So I'm Rochelle, and my name literally means little lamb. I know you can tell that because of the way I act. But my mother went to Berkeley High, and she had a friend whose name was Rochelle, and she thought it was really pretty because she had met Rochelle's, Rachel's, and Raquel's, but she hadn't met a Rochelle. And so she set me up for a life of having to repeat my name 3 times, but it is what it is. The hope that I have for this work is, having done a little bit of work a couple of years ago when we were remote and in the pandemic, I felt like that was a good start, but I really want to move this forward. And so the hope I have at the board level is that when we get through this time next year, right, it's like maybe August or September 2024, we can really see some growth metrics that we are like, the expectations are really clear and we can do this work. I do know that it's slow and it really takes time to build. So thank you so much for that. Here's the scope really, and our theory of action. The 5 Ds is my own framework that I've written with my writing partner. The notion of defining, disrupting, dismantling, so we can dream and design. We are in the define stage, just so you know where we are as part of our framework. And when I'm meeting with leaders, when I'm meeting with those of you who are here today, when I'm meeting with principals, even with students, it's imperative for us to move forward as a board, but speaking the same shared language. And I think a lot of times when we use terms, they can be polarizing and can also incite fear, right? And what we want to do is alleviate that by making sure we all know what we're talking about all at the same time. When we move past defining, which I'm hoping to start doing second semester, then we start talking about what does it mean to disrupt. And disrupt literally means dominoes are falling, and you place your hand or something in the middle of these dominoes. So they've fallen here, but these dominoes are still standing. You've literally disrupt the pattern of behavior. What I'm hoping for the board is that we're gonna put some policies in place to literally disrupt what's happening. Then we have to talk about how we hold people, accountable, but let's talk about what does it mean to disrupt at several levels. Beyond that, what I see for you years 2, 3, 4, and 5 is how we are dismantling some of those systems. And that's the hard work. But we can't just tear down. You have to rebuild. So when I was coming in today, there was a conversation, there may be some things that might be torn down, but what I love is but what we rebuild is going to be beautiful. And that's what I think about as we're looking at how we can dismantle some pieces and then dream and design what's possible. So the 5 Ds are the framework. Today, we're going to continue to build some community among those of us who are in the room. We're going to define some terms. We're going to ask you about your personal anti-racist commitment. Look at understanding we're going to look at policies. I have a framework for you that I think is going to be fun. Maybe not. Maybe fun's a bad word. Maybe it'll be interesting to help us really start to interrogate policy. So at the board level, we need to know how to look at policies. We can't just walk up to a policy and be like, this is bad, get rid of it, move on. We have to have a framework for figuring out how the conversations happen to move those policies. So I'm hoping to do some of that today. Our flow is a little off because we got started late. These are our community agreements that I shared with our leaders, and they added the 2 in. If you could look those over, and then if you could decide upon one that you want to really focus on today. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just look those over. Q-tip. Thank you. If you have any questions about any of them, that would be a great time to ask. So Q-tip means quit taking it personal. A lot of times we have a norm and we feel like, or if something happens, we feel attacked, right? So let's just make sure that we have care. Any other norms that are here or community agreements about which there may be questions? And if having none, if we could just go around and say, what's one community agreement that we're gonna abide by all of them, but what's one that you're just holding dear?
I would say we honor everyone's personal experiences.
We're honoring everybody's personal experiences? Yes, thank you.
Because I have a takeover spirit, I'm gonna work on, we will step up and step back.
Thank you.
I want to come strong, we will be accountable to the group.
Love it, thank you.
Personally, for me, we will suspend judgment and be open to new ideas.
Yeah, that's really important. What about for the 2 of you?
We will respect confidentiality and remain present.
Thank you, it's good to remain present.
I think we'll step up and step back also.
Thank you, thanks so much in that, all right. So I would like us to also agree to create a brave space. I understand this is recorded, I understand it's public, I understand you're the board, I understand people talk back to you, I understand you hear from people, but look, we cannot do anti-racism work without having an element of courage and bravery. Courage, literally from the Latin cor, meaning the heart, right? So this is hard work. And so I know your board members, and I know it's like, oh, somebody might say something to me. I'm gonna encourage you to be really thoughtful, but also brave, right? And brave does not always mean safe, right? Safe space sometimes happens and we're like, I'm not gonna say anything because if I say anything, it could be construed as difficult. Anti-racism work means that we're literally pushing against what's the norm. The norm is falling and we're pushing back, right? When you push back against something, there is resistance. I don't go to the gym as much as I should, but when I do go, right, there's resistance that I'm doing. That's hard work. I can't move those weights unless I'm literally pushing. Pushing requires bravery. And so I'm gonna ask us to accept that we're gonna feel uncomfortable. I'm gonna ask us to think about taking risks, but with compassion with care, with accountability, so that we can do this work. And if I can get a thumbs up for everybody, we're gonna be brave. Okay, I'm gonna hold you to it. All right, if somebody could read this quote for me.
The beauty of anti-racism is that you don't have to pretend to be free of racism to be an anti-racist. Anti-racism is a commitment to fight racism wherever you find it, including in yourself, and it's the only way forward.
And it's the only way forward. I use this quote in everything because I think a lot of times we're either waiting for someone to be like, hello, I'm an anti-racist, or we have resistors who are like, I'm not gonna step into that. And what I'm suggesting today is that as a district, we can no longer wait. And so when we have resistors, I'm not asking you to pretend to be free of racism. We can't do that. It's baked into everything. But what we can do is make a commitment to fight racism. And that can happen in a variety of ways. We're going to talk about that at the end. What are our next steps? But if we can all make a commitment that we're going to at least name and fight it, that's one huge step. And the fight might be within. And what Olulu did not say in this quote, the fight might be in your home, right? It might be with family members, right? Like that might be your fight right now. How can I even have this conversation with people I love? Because that certainly might be easier than having a conversation with people I don't love, right? So let's remember that as we move forward. Let's start with some definitions. There are 4 levels of racism. It's personal, it's interpersonal, it's institutional, and it is structural. Personal racism is about this notion of what do I believe, right? I used this example before. If I believe that everybody with orange hair can sing better than anybody else, that's my personal belief. And I can have personal beliefs. And I think what happens when we're in schools is we get really offended when people don't immediately change their personal beliefs. And I want to say something hugely unpopular, that I cannot go, how many people work here? 80,000? I don't know. I can't go up to 80,000 people and poll each one of them and make sure that their beliefs have shifted. That's an impossible task, all right? So I can have the belief about people with orange hair. When I enact that with someone, you don't have orange hair, so you can't sing. I'm personally enacting that against you. That's interpersonal, and it becomes about my behavior, right? So I can start to go, I'm not happy with your behavior. It's based on your belief. I can't change your beliefs, but I don't like your behavior. What do I need to do to monitor your behavior? I need to go into my institutional policy. Institutional racism happens within an institution. So if WCCUSD was the only educational system that was founded on racist principles, we could fix WCCUSD and we'd be done. But it is not, right? And so institutions across our country, banking, education, federal home loan, like every single institution is inherently built on racist principles. But when you are within an institution and you experience discriminatory treatment, policies, practices, that's where you can start to attack. I don't want to use the word attack. You start to monitor behavior on the interpersonal that happens from beliefs. And feel free at any time while I'm talking to stop me and engage me in questions, all right? Structural, then, is what happens across institutions. So again, because WCCUSD is not the only educational institution, then what happens structurally is education is built on that same system of that same racist systems. So, all of the Bay Area school districts, right, would be structural. And then together, institutional and structural create systemic racism. Why do I spend all this time talking about the different levels of racism?
We have to have an understanding of what we are going to be approaching, looking at, dealing with.
Absolutely. When you spend all your time worrying about personal racism, it really can be, forget tiring, it can feel overwhelming. I would literally have to go to every single person and go, do you believe that, right? That's just overwhelming. First of all, it's all overwhelming, but I feel like I can have a little bit more of an impact when I understand the level of racism. Here's the thing, I do not in any way, I mean, I'm dope, let's just acknowledge that, but I cannot possibly say, if you work with me, we can get rid of systemic racism. Because it's the institution and the structural together. That's beyond my control. I also cannot say that I think if we do something, then every single district in California is suddenly gonna make a shift. But what I think we can do is we can work with, especially at the school board level, institutional racism. This is key because sometimes somebody's gonna say to you, I think this person is racist, I think that, and they may be. And I need us to understand that. They may indeed be racist or at least hold racist beliefs. Probably can't stop that, probably can't change it, but what we can do is create a policy to shift their behavior and how that impacts our students. Okay? I wanted to make sure that we get that. Also, I want to talk about why DEI is not enough. I'm sure you heard from many constituents like, why don't we just do DEI? Why don't we just do DEI? DEI. Listen, DEI is not enough. Diversity just means the presence of difference. That's all it is. So when people are like, we do diversity, I was like, you really don't, actually. Right now, there are diverse books in this library. They're all different types of books. There are paperback books and hardback books and short books and tall books. And what we could do is we could spend time looking at the diversity of books in this library, but that only means that we have a quantitative measurement of books. It doesn't talk about the quality of the books. It doesn't talk about how old the books are. Is anybody reading these books? Like it's just, right? It's just a quantitative measurement. It's not enough. It's insufficient. Do we want diversity? Yes. Is it enough? No. Okay? Diversity, inclusion. Can we really have, what happens when we have diversity is this. When we have inclusion, folks are collective, are more together, but even with inclusion, it's not enough because I don't want to be included in spaces that are not designed for me. So inclusion then can't happen without also belonging. You see how they all are knitted together there. And I asked this question before, is this inclusion? This is a conversation. I am not going to lecture for 2 hours. So
No, it's not.
it's not inclusion. Why not?
So well, the majority is it's not mixed.
Okay. What about others? It's not mixed, so this may not be inclusion. What about others? Is this inclusion?
This is textbook inclusion, but this is not the inclusion that we are wanting to have at any level in our district.
Why is it textbook inclusion?
Because two women are included, they're there, so they're included, but they are not wanted and they do not feel belonging.
Yeah, they're pretty disgusted by their, by their arms being folded. Someone recently mentioned this to me and I even missed it when I used this example. They're like, nobody is talking to them. I was like, nobody is talking to them. That was like brilliant.
And they're not part of the joke. Everybody else is smiling.
Everybody else is smiling and happy. And they are not included, nor do they belong. But it is textbook inclusion. I would offer, this is what happens when we put students in certain classrooms, and we call that inclusion. Classrooms weren't created for them. The classrooms remain as they are and don't shift, the structure remains the same, but we put students who were formerly left out in those classrooms, and we call that inclusion without changing or shifting the practices or shifting the classroom or doing anything to make it more meaningful. So it is definitely textbook inclusion, but not the inclusion that we want. And this is what often happens to our students. So diversity, not enough. Inclusion requires a lot more. Equity, we all like to say we're doing equity. In fact, I would say that 87%, I just made that up, 87% of the districts in California are like, we definitely do equity. And what we do is equity because we do equity, right? Equity is about providing access. Now, am I gonna say that people who are really working to provide access to our most overlooked students are not doing a good job? I am not gonna say that. What I am gonna offer is that it is insufficient. Gonna be in a moment, but it's active. I think I put active and all, yeah, I used active like 3 times in the slide. It's active. Which means you cannot passively be like, yo, I feel like I'm the anti-racist, but I'm just gonna sit here. Like it requires movement, right? And it's an approach. There is never a time when you just are it because it's consistent, right? And then finally, it names white supremacy culture, it names whiteness, it names all those things that we don't like to name. That becomes very, very painful. It's much easier to do equity because we don't have to name anything. Being anti-racist means we need to name that which we are pushing against. Remember when I said you're pushing and I did that whole thing about the weights that I did this morning, right? It's about naming and challenging and actively being able to disrupt whiteness. There's no way you can push against racism unless you understand how racism began and what racism is and all those other different pieces. And in order to do that, you need to name that, and that becomes anti. So the framing that I want to offer is that to work towards anti-racism, it requires all of these, and I have them in gears because they all work together. So the framing I'm offering is, yes, you do need equity, but you also need diversity. And you also need inclusion, you need belonging, you need justice, you need identity, and you need values. And all of those work together to create anti-racism. And it's a naming of whiteness throughout as a lens that you use towards anti-racism. This is a slightly different framing, and I recognize that because I've done a lot of reading and I've done a lot of work, and I do a lot of work in schools. And I'm like, it's not one thing. And I finally came like this aha. It's not this one thing where, okay, I'm doing anti-racism, so all I gotta do is this one thing. It is an amalgamation of several different pieces and strategies working together to create a structure that is pushing against racism. And then you have to really understand the foundation of racism, which is whiteness. So I feel like I'm gonna rebuild this to have like the foundation down here and somebody stepping on it and like lifting up. But until I can figure that out, understand that you cannot push against racism unless you understand what racism is. Go for it.
It actually goes back to the origin of the foundation of this country, how the
Absolutely.
country was built.
Absolutely.
And what it stood for. So it goes all the way back to the very beginning of the founding fathers. Of this country.
Absolutely.
So.
Yes, no, I mean, we need to understand that while oppression existed, race was created in this country, right? Because there've always been differences, but they were always cultural, right? I don't want to go into my history moment, but here's the thing. Since you brought it up, it's gonna be your fault. So the reality is, right, that even when we were in the colonial times, people were always identified by their country of origin. So if you were from Italy, you were Italian. And if you were from Poland, you were
Polish.
for sure, right? It was not until Bacon's Rebellion in this country that those who were of the lower class, not the ruling class, started to try to have a rebellion against those who were the elite. And when that happened, the elite looked and said, they are all ganging up against us, and there were more of them than there were the elite. It was not until after Bacon's Rebellion, that's the first time you see the word white in language. Right? And I have a whole thing on this that I could do, but really for bullet points, what the ruling elite said was, how do we stop people who are financially oppressed, poor, right? How do we stop those people from ganging up against us? It is the first time that we understand divide and conquer. And their answer was, we need to create a system by which those people who look closest to us will not, even though they're not the ruling elite, will no longer see themselves as part of those who are being oppressed. What should we do? Let's create a series of laws that privileges people who have a certain type of skin tone against other people. And that was how race started in this country. Yes.
I was wondering if you could define justice for us.
Absolutely. So, when I use justice around anti-racism, it is justice that allows for the ruling class and the ruling elite to be held to the same or even better standards than the people that they're oppressing, is basically what justice looks like. And so understanding, again, naming whiteness, naming white supremacy, naming privilege allows us to seek justice for those who are most frequently oppressed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sidebar, happy to do a longer piece on the history of how race started in America, by the way. It is fascinating. But okay, yeah, we can do that for anyone. I would love to do that for students too. So can we turn and talk as board members, even though we're in the system? Okay, so like if we could do a turn and talk, how do these definitions help you understand the path forward? So maybe if I could have a turn and talk here and a turn and talk here. Let's just take 2 minutes to do that. We're gonna get in turn and literally talk. Genesis, is there any? Yes, there is. I actually.
Water help you.
Yeah. So turn and talk.
I'm really interested for you to finish what you were going to say.
Having deep recognition, helping articulate that, so I don't have to talk about you know, you are being, you are just doing it. You are just still in that version.
Right.
Add a layer. And say to you.
Yeah, yeah, I don't like that. Yeah. Define how to push back. Those that feel that we are doing it now. And those who feel like you have done it, and those who feel like you have not done. Right, express what it is that we do. Excellent to a point like but then we struggle. Right. So I think that's really good. I think
go about, you know, doing what they want to do. Yes.
Alright. We have that one,
So, it's about what the word I used to say in the beginning is cohesive. You have that ability to cohesive environment, making everybody feel, yeah. Not feeling this. I mean, so. What I think is making a difference. Making a difference. You know, especially when in the classroom, making a difference. It's all right for this one, but not this one. Right. Instead of bringing everybody together, making everybody feel the same.
Okay, I'm gonna bring us back together. Thanks so much. So these definitions may be different than what we've heard before. How might they help us with our path forward?
Well, we talked about, if I can share, I think we talked about how to be able to express and call out what we are seeing that is not happening or is being done. Like, we are really good sometimes within our system to say that we are diverse or that we are very inclusive. But then this is helping me with the clarity of like the difference between anti-racist space and a diverse space, right, or an inclusive space. And I think that it helps give us clarity about what's happened in the past, but then it helps us with what needs to occur moving forward.
I love that.
Yeah, that's what.
That makes me feel great as a teacher. But also, it's not bad to have an inclusive space. Like, I want to make sure that I'm not presenting something where it's like, oh, inclusivity. We don't want, no, we want inclusivity. We want belonging. I'm just saying that it's not sufficient. And so we might want to push past that. But yes, let's work to create inclusive spaces, especially in our classroom.
Well, and I think that our board is a good example of that, right? Like, we have 4 BIPOC, we have 3 Black board members, 1 Latino, 1 Black superintendent, right? And we are not out of place that I could call ourselves to be anti-racist. Right, which is really shocking, but at the same time, it's not because of what we are experiencing within the system and in this institution to be fine, right? So I think that it's giving me that clarity of like, okay, what is it that as a group we need to do to push past that, right? Yeah,
So you're diverse as a board. And then the question would be, do board members feel like they all have access? Do board members feel like they're inclusive? Do board members feel like they belong? Right? In what ways are your values represented at the board level? And all that just requires time together to process those pieces.
I think it's part of the community thought that it was gonna be a Barack Obama moment when we turned Black and brown.
Yeah.
But it's no Barack Obama moment. He didn't even have a Barack Obama moment because the foundation is whiteness. The foundation is white supremacy, the foundation. So I think for even us on the board, we're 3 years in and it's like, yeah, we are walking in quicksand, right? So we have to kind of look at each other and like, are we moving? Like, are we sinking? are we in the expectation that we have inside and the expectation that is put on us on the outside? You have this, you have part of the community that has this Messiah complex. Well, y'all are there, change it now. No, we trying to chip away at 400 years of stuff, and we can't just do it like that. It just doesn't happen like that, but the expectation is you're a black and brown board. You got a black CAO, you got a black CBO, you got a black superintendent, you have 3 black board members, you have a Latinx board member, you have 2 women on the board. Why can't you break all of these ceilings and things down? And it's one of those things that is because we fighting over crumbs and not taking over the kitchen. It's the same thing. It's the same normalization of we put us all in the room, we end up fighting over crumbs instead of literally saying, let's take over the kitchen and bake our own bread. So we're constantly doing that instead of doing the real work, we're just chopping that head off that snake. So I think that that's the anti-racism work, is like really getting in there and saying, we're all intentionally focused on chopping this head off.
And I think that's great. I would wonder if we're gonna have a brave space, all right? I would wonder how to do that when 2 of our board members are missing. I would wonder how we do that when we've not maybe well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but have we actually said as a board, we are working towards anti-racism as a board, right? And so I think there's work that has to happen everywhere. And we're at the very beginning, it's November. How do we come together to have those really rough conversations that will help us move forward so that our constituents are like, oh, okay, I see that they're moving towards some things. And if I might also say, when we start talking about policies in about 15 minutes, we have to be all in the same canoe, rowing in the same direction to get down that river that you mentioned. And I don't know where we are. This is my first time meeting with the board, so I don't know.
So I think we stop focusing on the personal. I can't bring you here. I can't make you come here. I can't love you into this space. All I can do is throw your life jacket because we moving. It only takes 3. It takes 3 people to make policy. You have 3, it takes 3 of us to set a vision for the superintendent, and then he goes based on the 3. So I think what it is we are in a boat together and we got the motor running and we're going down the river. We throw life jackets because you don't want to drown nobody, but it's not my intention to make sure you can swim, get on the boat, have a good time and have a cocktail. We moving.
No, I'm not suggesting that, but I do think that there could be people who puncture the boat.
Oh, absolutely.
Who slash the tires.
Absolutely.
Right, and so what we want to avoid.
They get a long string on the raft all the way over there. So
We're gonna work this metaphor till it's dead.
Yeah.
We're killing it. We're gonna kill it till it's dead, for sure. What about this group? How do these definitions help you understand the path forward?
Well, I was just gonna kind of build off of what you were saying. I do agree that 3 board members set direction. But I'm glad you said that because I wrote it down in my book. What does this look like for the other 2? And I know I have to get to a point where I stop concerning myself so much about the other 2, but in a brave space, there's so much havoc that those 2 can do behind the scenes to staff that just causes a lot of weariness, frustration, a lot of everything. So even though I try not to worry about the other 2, they insert themselves, behind the scenes. Even though I know the 3 people, board members, are going to set policy or give direction. But the question is, how do we still address like those 2? Try not to worry about them, but still.
I think it's good to be worried about opposition. I think it's good to be, maybe not worried, but I think we need to develop strategies, and you'll notice when I give you some next steps. The way to try and mitigate harm is to know harm's coming.
Yes.
Right, so that's why we go to the doctor once a year, right? Even though things are okay, we know there could be some things that come up. And we get tested to make sure everything is cool, but we make a plan. You know what, we're gonna eat better, we're gonna exercise, we're gonna go to the gym. Because we know that if we don't along the way, something else, we have to have a strategy, right? And we can't just go, I wonder if something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. How do we know?
Yeah.
Because we have data that shows that things always happen. We must be active. We're gonna talk about that in about 15 minutes if I think oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm so sorry.
If a structure has been in place for so long,
Yes,
so long,
yes,
and even as us new board members, we came into a structure that was already there.
for sure.
And now we're trying to clean up and make it better. And so it's a challenge. And the structure, like the way it is. They like
Absolutely.
what's going on, and they prefer to keep it that way.
Yes.
But we have to be strong to endure and to deal with this and eradicate the best way, the best way that we can.
We inherited the structure in which we were born, right? We were born into a racist structure, correct? Then we all agree? I know we're excited because swag is exciting, but we're born into a structure. So what we have to do is we have to stay the course, but we must make a plan. So this is a really good time for me to take a 1 minute so that, because who could work when there's swag walking in?
David, hi, everybody, welcome to Richmond High.
Hi.
All of your sizes and all of the, so I'm bringing you options. Right, so this is
Thank
what we got.
you.
At any time, if you choose, you want a hat? Okay, the hat is yours.
He did call.
But I called it. You call the scarf. We have some more scarves.
This is
Okay.
hilarious.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you.
I don't know.
None or the other, like the hoodie or the hat
So I was like, oh, man. I think your hand falling.
This was great. I'm so glad we were able to take that quick break. Let me really quickly run through this notion of neutrality. I have these slides here so that you know how to address your constituents. So when someone says, but I'm not racist, why are we doing anti-racism, right? Your answer is, it's neutral. It's a claim that signifies neutrality. There is no neutrality in the racism struggle, right? So the opposite of racist isn't not racist, it's anti, it's pushing against, right? Because racism is a passive response to generational trauma. When you say not racist, it's a passive response to generational trauma. In other words, I'm not racist and I've got 3 Black friends, so I'm good. That is a passive response to more than 400 years of generational trauma. And not racist says, I'm not really part of that stuff that those other people do. That's what those other people deal with. I don't live in Alabama, right? I live in California. I'm not racist and I'm cool, right? And like, look, I played basketball. I used to hoop with some brothers, right? All the things that I keep hearing, right? As if I'm apart from racist society when I've been born and bred in it and it's the air that I breathe. Yes, sir.
The difference between the South and here, South is blunt, what they do back there in the South. Here, they cover it up.
That used to be true, sir, but we're hanging people in California. We are having very, very, very racist conversations. There are nooses at our schools. There are, what I want to say, I'm being recorded, right? There are, to be brave, I'm going to say that there's been a shift in our national discourse as a result of our politics. And so while I used to say that, like, if we're just not in Alabama, we'll be okay. But there's some spaces in California, I can't drive through at night either.
And the reason why I say that, when I went to school down there in Texas.
Yeah.
Every time we went into the grocery store, people ask when we go in the grocery store, they follow us around the grocery store.
Absolutely.
And I had to turn around and say, I'm not stealing nothing. All I'm doing is buying what I need so I can go. This police officer will follow us all around the grocery store.
Right.
And
my son, who is 19, and his friends were on Bay Street in Emeryville, and the police were called. 3 boys, 3 Black boys. What are you doing on Bay Street? Shouldn't they be on Bay Street? Where else? There's nowhere else to hang out here, right? So, so I believe that it's definitely a larger, more in your face issue, but it's still super prevalent. And the shifting of our national discourse has allowed what I would call permission being granted to the ways in which we see particularly anti-Blackness in this country. Permission granted. And we're gonna be in trouble next year if we don't figure it out.
And y'all ain't nothing but Alabama with palm trees. From Alabama. Y'all just got better weather, and worse food, but
Yeah, it's definitely. So this is what I hope that you can share with your constituents. Can somebody read this quote from Kendi?
One either allows racial inequalities to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequalities as an anti-racist.
Let's pause there. Your people come to you and they're like, I don't think we should be doing this anti-racism thing. Your constituents, parents, community members. I find the best way to respond is not from attack, but from using a quote. Feel free to use Kendi's quote. Feel free. Either, there's no 2 ways. Either you allow, and I would say racial inequities in our schools, because you're board members, to exist, as a person who is allowing racism, or you're confronting them as someone who is anti-racist. There's no in-between space of that. There's no in-between space, right? So either I am pushing against what we know is not good for our babies, or I'm allowing it. And if I'm allowing it, I'm allowing racism. And people who allow racism, the worst thing that you can be called in America is a racist, but people who allow racism are racist. It's a heavy quote, and that's why I'm pushing on it. But as board members, I heard you say we have to set the tone. I heard you say we have to model, then this is the model. All right. So to that, I would like to offer you a proposed vision statement.
Can we read it out loud?
Yeah, I was letting it marinate at first, because, I dropped the mic on it, so I worked on this already, so I was like, I really want to let that kind of marinate for me. So I'm suggesting, and you can wordsmith it to death, right? But I think we need to figure out who we are and set our tone as a board. Institutional, structural, and systemic racism has been ingrained in US history and throughout the public education system, right? So that's a factual statement. As a school board, we understand and recognize the racialized root causes of barriers to equitable educational outcomes for each child, but particularly for African-American children. And so we're naming anti-Blackness in that statement. We are uniquely positioned to shift these outcomes. So as a board, let me tell you what we do. We set goals, we approve policies, we adopt curriculum, we set budgets, and we oversee administrative aspects for West Contra Costa. But we also serve as a direct line of communication from the community to the district. Therefore, we acknowledge and recognize that we are ultimately responsible for fulfilling the promise of public education to students at WCCC, and we will do better. We're not gonna be perfect. We're not gonna eradicate racism, but we make a pledge to do better. And I'm gonna send this to you so you can have it, y'all can play with it. Because I know, what boards have to do. But what I heard you say today was we set the tone. We are the people at the head. We, all the things that you said when I asked you your hope. As a fan of, okay, thank you. As a fan of therapy, and as a fan of someone who has been working with how do we grow, the first thing you do is set an intention when you're trying to make a change. And I think as a board, we need to set an intention. It doesn't have to be this language. This is specifically, when I worked on it, I was like, what would I want to have a board say if I was a parent? And what would I want a board to say if I was on the board? So it doesn't have to be this language, but as I worked on it, I was like, this is what I would want. All right, so what I want you to do with this is to take some time. I think what I'm gonna do, because of time, I was gonna have you do a turn and talk, but what I would love you to do is, I want you to let this marinate. Because I really want to get us to policies today, and I'm gonna have to move it quickly. I'm gonna send it to you. I want you to think about it. It doesn't have to be this, but you must set an intention. Quick, like at the top of your head, quick thoughts on this?
Well, I guess my question would be how this will tie to the superintendent's vision that he's creating for the district. So, how are we going to mash them together?
How does it tie to, I couldn't hear.
Dr. Hurst is creating a vision for the district.
Nice.
Writing a vision.
I love it.
So I wonder how it ties to that.
Yeah.
because he's also created an anti-racist statement.
I love it. We should work together.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Almost like I planned it. That is great. So it doesn't, this is proposed, right? But this is like my best thinking for the board. Happy to wordsmith, play with, see how it can be embedded. Happy to have a working session with you. I just want y'all to have an intention. Yeah.
I think this is great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just proud of it.
I think that one of the things that I'm finding in these sessions is that you're allowing, and creating words to feelings. So for me, this just adds to words to feelings. I feel like this is what we should be doing, but now we have the verbiage behind it. This is what we should be doing. You know what I mean? So I think that there's a level of thank you for kind of putting it in words. And I'm not even necessarily think we should play with it. I think we should stamp it, publish it, and move on. But I appreciate it.
It's always easier to change something that's already in front of you than to be like, hey, y'all, get in the room and crack it. So what I wanted to do is be like, let's start from here. And then, given your work, Dr. Hurst, that you're doing, I'm swimming across, right? Start from here, play with it, put it together, and let's just make sure that we don't go another year without having some intentionality.
I like it in red, white, and blue too. That wasn't lost on me.
Is it?
Yep.
Isn't that orange?
Orange.
You know, I'm colorblind. It's red.
Oh, okay. It's orange, white, and purple.
Wow.
Right.
In my mind.
I was like, I probably would not use red, white, and blue. I'm not thrilled with my country right now. Okay, so I want to give this to you. I was gonna have you do a whole thing with it, but given our time, I'm not gonna be able to do that, but I will definitely send it to you so you can have it.
Yeah.
All right. Skip that. All right, so how do we do it? Where do we start? Right? We understand our definitions and notice I'm using a different frame of voice because we would have come back from our break and now we're all calm. Yeah. Okay, I'm good. All right. How do we make a shift? At your level, we got to look at policies and procedures. And so what I want to do for us today, what time is lunch coming?
We're done at 12, aren't we?
We're done at 1. Uh-oh.
That'll work.
Oh,
Shoot, it's on 12. Who was it?
okay.
Not me.
Not gonna get into that. Somebody else's business.
Just have lunch coming?
We do, so, Richmond High is gonna be providing it, so I'm checking with her to see what time.
Okay,
they bring.
so what we can do certainly is I'm gonna try and be through in 30 minutes and maybe we can just talk over lunch and have time to be together. I gotta go real quick. Okay, look, here's what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna give you a pretend policy. Okay. I have to do that. Okay, so real quick, what's the difference between a policy, a practice, and a procedure? Right, a policy is usually a written document and it should tell you who does it and why the document is there, right? So a policy like is school attendance, that's a statewide policy. The grades needed to pass a class should be a policy that is school-wide, right? Graduation standards are also statewide. Those are policies, right? A procedure should also be a written document that tells you how to do the thing that is the policy. What we often do is skip over procedures. And then people are like, I don't know how this happened. I've been doing it for 20 years. That does not mean it's the procedure, right? A procedure is like a driver's ed manual that tells you how to drive the car, how to observe the written rules, right? Tax instructions. I don't know about you, but I spend an inordinate amount of time reading over tax stuff, right? How do we pay people? That should be a procedure. I'm gonna get off of that, all right? But a practice is where we really, in education, we tend to be rogue. Right? A practice is an activity that's generally repeated and thought to be effective, but we get rogue because we all feel like we should be doing our own kind of practice. We all kind of, right? That looks like If any of you watch Steph, he spends a lot of time dribbling, he spends a lot of time figuring out his stuff. I mean, he can have 38 points and we still lose, so what does that tell you? Creating lesson plans is a thing, or my son's a drummer and rudiments, right? You need to know what you're doing. You're creating policies, but also you are many times creating procedures. And that's gonna be really, really important. And what you wanna do is have an eye on the practice that is the result of the procedure that tells you how to implement the policy. So I wanna say again, the practice is what happens on the ground, if you will. Those are what your teachers are doing, your principals are doing. You wanna have an eye to that because it needs to follow the procedure that implements the policy, okay? So Kendi again says, every policy in every institution, in every community, in every nation is producing or sustaining either a racial inequity or an equity between a policy that is racially inequitable or that's racially equitable. Every policy, every policy, every policy, every policy. Every policy.
Every policy.
Yeah, it's call and response. Every policy,
Every.
every policy. That means the ones that you have approved and haven't approved, every policy. So what I'd like you to do is I'm gonna put you in small groups, and as much as you guys want to participate, feel free. Let's look at this policy. I know this doesn't happen in West Contra Costa School District, but some people have a policy of no late homework. Let's say that's a policy. It's written. It's probably part of a syllabus, right? So it's written. There's a procedure and there's a practice. All right. So Feldman in Grading for Equity says, when teachers accept late work, learning becomes more important than deadlines. It is more important for students to do the work than to make them conform to a teacher's timeline. If the work was important, it was important whether they did it by the due date or whether it's later. This is controversial. And I chose it because all the policies you'll be dealing with are also controversial, right? So I would love for you to get into small groups. Here's your policy review. I'm gonna send this to you as well. These are 6 questions you as a board should be asking, and I would also argue anybody who's making policy decision, these are 6 questions you should be asking to talk about whatever the policy is. It is called a policy review. What's the intention? What does it aim to accomplish? Does it align with what happens? Remember those practices and practice? Is it realistic? Who benefits, who's negatively affected, who has a voice, and whose voice is currently silenced, and then deciding, is this a policy that is fighting against racism, or is it allowing racism to continue? So I was gonna put you in small groups. Do you wanna do this whole group?
So group.
We do it whole group.
All right, well, let's jump in. Let's talk about no late homework. What's the intention of the late homework policy? What does it aim to accomplish?
Have everybody turn around.
Most teachers want children to learn time management. So most teachers say, okay, I gave it to you on Monday, it's due on Friday. I'm not gonna take late work because you had plenty of time to do it and you should be able to manage your time. That's what I would say most people.
What does it aim to accomplish? To your answer, I just want you to like succinctly.
It aims to accomplish
Time management.
time management.
Is that what the homework assignment was though?
No,
This is a time management class.
no.
I think it aims to standardize potentially, the work that needs to happen.
Same one.
So for example, so that, I think that if a teacher's, by the way, I think that I'm putting myself in the shoes of the person who would write this, even if I don't personally agree, but I think that if I was implementing that, I think that I would be thinking about how can I make it quote unquote equitable for students so that the person who's turning in on time has the same, I don't know, I'm having a hard time to say, has the same right as the person who student turn in on time the next time. Having a hard time scoring it.
So you might have a point system by which
Mhm.
a student turns it in this time on time, and then a student who turns it in late, next time when they turn it on time, they can then have access, because that's what equity is about.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does the policy aim to accomplish, and what's the intention behind no late homework? Is this the first time you guys have heard of a no late homework
No.
policy? Okay, so what is it, what's the intention of the policy?
It's also to keep me on track. I'm a teacher, I got a pacing guide. I gotta get to chapter 13 by December to make sure that you're able to take the test that covers chapter 1 through 13, that's a district test that I have to give you. So it's also, you can't slow me down. So I'll put in deadlines, but so we all can get there, whether I leave you behind or not, because I know I'm gonna leave some people behind. But I've got to get to chapter 13 because my boss is gonna come in and say, what chapter are you on? And I'm gonna be held to level of accountability. So your homework is able to help me pace my class.
The aim is to pace my class.
Mhm.
All right, what about other intention? What about like from the four of you over here? What's the intention of a no late homework policy, and what does it aim to accomplish?
I
To get their
actually
homework.
don't believe in that policy, so it's hard for me to come up. I've had this conversation in a number of different districts.
I bet.
And I'm not even sure if I believe in the homework policy, period,
Fair.
because it's really for students in practice. It's for practice for the students. But I think what you all said is really the intent, it's really for the adults.
So number 4.
Mhm. Mhm. Homework is really supposed to benefit students, like in practice. So why are we penalizing them if it's late, if it's for their benefit?
So that gets to 2 and 3 and 4, right? How does the policy intention align with what happens in day-to-day practice?
Mhm.
What is the purpose, right? This is why when we're looking at policies, and of course, this one, right, doesn't really have a lot of, it's not high stakes, but the policies that you will be, as a board, that you will be approving or writing are high stakes policies. And I want you to think about, I feel like this is a policy, but what's the intention behind it?
Mhm.
And what does it aim to accomplish? Is it aligned with what happens? Do children turn in late homework?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So let me say this, isn't like a weeding out? You weed out, certain students are gonna turn in, and then you weed out the other ones who are not gonna turn in. I don't know, I'm just.
Maybe, I mean, that could certainly happen. The question is it aligned with what happens in day-to-day practice? If you have a policy that says no late homework, but you know people gonna turn in work, is that, yeah,
The reason why this has always bothered me is
Yeah.
because we should be trying to think of a system that allows students multiple opportunities
right,
to get it, like mastery learning.
right.
Right, so how do we make sure that a student has opportunities during the day, after the school day, to understand the standards? And for me, homework falls into that as well. So why would we penalize students if we're really trying to get them to understand?
Because it's control.
Yeah,
If I have 100 kids and they can turn in their work at any point during the time, that means I'm constantly doing work. And this is a system that doesn't allow me to have the bandwidth to constantly do work. I have this time to this time to grade. If you're telling me I can let a kid turn in homework anytime, that means I have to grade at home, I have to grade on the weekend, I have to grade, because that's what y'all are looking at is my grading policy with the homework being part of it. And it's this system that we created that I gotta get a 4.3 GPA, or I gotta get a 4.2 GPA. If I stop grading homework and it's all about the test, some people test differently. So then Jimmy's like, well, how am I supposed to make up my grade because it's all on my midterm and my final? You're not accepting any homework or classwork or whatever. Then it's also a sense of control as a teacher. If you play football, I control your grade. I control your access to then having trajectory outside of it, because if you're lower than a 3.0, and I don't take late homework, and I got a classroom full of football or basketball players or whatever, I know that you at least turning my stuff in because I weight my homework heavier than I weight my test. So it's control and ownership that the teacher in this situation is having, because I need to maintain some type of power. I'm complete.
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate what the both said, because I think that it speaks about probably a little bit of the intention of like the teacher potentially, let's say that it's not just about them, but it's about wanting the student to have a sense of deadlines, right? Which is going to be important in their life. But the reality, the day-to-day in all of our jobs is that if a deadline is missed, there's usually a good reason for it, and space is given to the individual to be able to not, like, if there's a death in the family, right, like most likely any work will be like, yes, please take another few weeks, right, as an extension, right? Right. It's not so much about like removing the deadline, but it's about giving students and ourselves the wiggle room in case something is brought up, right? And I think that's where it does not reflect this policy today, because even if we're trying to teach students about deadline and the importance of that, it does not follow the practice that exists.
Yeah.
Right. I did this with a group of teachers and they were all, you know, and we got to teach them. And I said, how many of you turn in your lesson plans on time?
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, and then there was silence in the land.
Right.
And I said, how many of you are late on some other things and then you turn it in when, you know, and it's acceptable in work, right? So this notion that I've never been on a job where they fired me because I turned in something late. That just has never, ever happened for me. Will my manager be like, yo, I thought I was supposed to have that. I was like, you know what? I totally forgot. Let me get that to you. And then I get them to you, but I've never, ever been fired for turning in something late. So what is this that we're preparing our students for? Because that doesn't happen realistically in life. Right. Folks be late and are still working, right? And so I understand the need to create boundaries, but I also think that this is a great example, to your point, Dr. Hurst, of what happens when we have these policies, but we haven't gone through a critical review, right? And number 5, that we just jumped right on over, at what point do we ask students how they feel about homework policy? And so therefore, if we're not asking them, then their voice is silenced. And is that equitable? Do they have access? Is that justice? I mean, you know, like we have to go through these questions, and I know you're thinking, you want me to have these conversations with every policy, but if we don't start to have these types of conversations and really think about that, we create policies that are intentionally or unintentionally holding up racism as opposed to shifting against it. We must look at these types of questions. Right? Is this policy intention realistic? Is it realistic to say no late homework? And I know there are teachers that are going to jump on me, and I'm okay with that. But when I was teaching, I didn't do homework. Number 1, everybody's home is different. So that was an issue of equity for me. Number 2, people had jobs after school, because I taught in deep East Oakland. And folks weren't just leaving and kicking and going home, right? And number 3, there were people who had really great opportunities and there were people who didn't. And so I didn't do homework, but I did leave my classroom open after school for additional blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
And I was just gonna say, this is really a big issue, and I've seen it, you know, in a lot of different districts, and we really put students in a situation where we are penalizing them, and it's hard for them to kind of get out of the hole. Especially when you have like some teachers, and I've seen this where they have the weighted test, the weighted quiz and the weighted homework. And if you miss homework, it's given on a regular basis and it's worth X%, then it's almost impossible to catch up. And another policy is like this 0, like the case against 0, where you have, if you don't turn in your homework, or if you miss a quiz, or if you miss a test, that's worth about 30% of your grade, and you get a 0, it's almost impossible. And it's based on like kids who are working or have responsibilities or something else happening. So we do have a system where we're penalizing kids.
Well, we have that growth mindset jargon
Mhm.
without growth mindset policy.
Right.
I'm totally in agreement with that. Like, we have the growth mindset policy, everything, you know, people are farting bubbles and chasing rainbows, but we don't have it in the classroom.
Mhm.
My pushback to that would be, are we setting them up for a world that does not exist?
Right.
Are we setting them up for a world, again, being from the South, it was like, you gotta be the bionic woman, you gotta be better, smarter, faster, quicker, on time, never late. It's always on, if you gotta be early, because if you're on time, you're late, right? And then you're gonna be the black person that's late. You're gonna be the black person that's unreliable if you don't turn in your work on time or before or double check. So at what point are we repeating and entrenching those norms? And at what point are we creating black children and children of color to say, treat me like you treat them? Betty got a pass.
Mhm.
Why am I not getting a pass? Right? So I think that's what I wrote.
Yeah, it's all about what's the fear? What's the fear that is underlying this type of policy? The fear is, I will not be able to teach you what I need to teach you in a timely manner. And my question is, if you can't teach me what you need to teach me without homework, then maybe we should look at instructional strategies. What's happening in class?
Right.
The second fear is, I won't be able to control when you turn that homework in.
Mhm.
And so what I love from some teachers that I'm noticing is they have I forgot what they call it, but like it's an ever increasing grade book. They don't close the grade book until the end of the year.
Mhm.
That does make more work for teachers, but it also provides the type of opportunity that I think is what happens in our world.
Yeah.
I have all the time. If I tell you I'm sending you something by Friday, I send an email and go, I'm gonna be able to get it to you on Tuesday. Right? And that's what happens in the work world. So if we wanted to really do what happens in the work world. Finally, you'll notice what I didn't include here is, does this privilege or not privilege a certain race? And why would I not include that in a critical policy review?
I guess I'm having a hard time answering that, 66 similarly.
Uh-huh.
So I'd love to learn more as to why I see it the same.
No, it's definitely, yeah, that, so I didn't purposefully though say, what race does this privilege?
Oh, I see.
Right? And that was purposeful because our schools are based on white supremacy. Right.
Mhm.
Right. So I didn't want to give you a policy review that someone could be like, so you're just talking about white, right? Like, I want you to be able to think beyond that, understanding that that's the lens that we use.
Mhm.
But it doesn't have to be one of the questions. So I was being very, very specific in this. I believe that our policies need to be interrogated. And it doesn't have to be just you, right? How great would it be to have a committee of people who start to look at, 3 or 4 policies a year? Because this takes time, right? To really review them and be like, what's the intent, like, what's one policy that's sort of dress code perfect? To really, really understand dress code, you really need to have a critical review. There are pros and cons to dress code, right? I'm a mom, I get it, been through it. And we have to review it in a way that is passionate, but also allows us to see where that policy lands. Which is different from somebody going, I don't like it because it's that, right? Like being able to really have some critical thought around it and to get into rooms where they would be really helpful, sir.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is that, once we push policy, the right policy, now it's up to the principals and all the counselors and all those who are at the school sites to be able to assemble their staff together and to be able to do the same thing, is to have dialogue and push the policy so they can understand that, hey, this is the policy and we all want to abide by the right policy.
You are correct. And this is why I began with the difference between policies, procedures, and practices. Once you have a policy, someone needs to decide what the procedure is. And this is, I said it before, this is the section that we miss, right? We do the policy. You're like, okay, we made this policy. Woo, we worked on it for 6 months. High five, board policy. Then we go into the procedures because somebody's gonna go, how are we supposed to do that? And we don't do that. We do the policy and then we're like, yo, go figure out the procedures. No, ma'am, no, sir. We do the policy and then the addendum to the policy, and this is how we want to do it, right? So it's just like the driver's education manual. There's all these laws that are policy about how we drive, right? But then they give you this thick manual that are the procedures of how you do it. We know that you stop at a red light, right? Or we know you're supposed to yield. Everybody does yield a different way. What does the book say though? What does the driver's manual say about yielding? We all drive every day, right?
God looks both ways and then go.
For how long?
3 seconds.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That is the procedure that follows the, yes, that follows the policy. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
I guess I'm really curious on your thoughts though,
Mhm.
because I think that I'm so glad you're calling this out. And what is our role as a board? I'm gonna say it and then I want to hear your.
Yeah.
I see our role, and this might be a disagreement between the board,
Yeah.
right? Because I see it in practice. We all see it, are doing it differently,
Right.
right? So my view is that we set the policy,
Yes.
we have a long conversation,
Yes.
and it's Dr. Hurst and his staff to come up with a procedure. Right, and then the expectations, and then the practices are created at the sites.
So you asked for my opinion or how it
Yes.
normally happens?
No, I wanna hear.
Oh, okay.
Because I think that here is done differently, right, depending, I think, on. the
Everywhere.
policy, depending on the superintendent.
Absolutely.
depending on the board,
Yes.
even now, right, like, when you have a board president who is like top down versus one who is collaborative, or, you
Absolutely.
know, like, it's done differently.
Everywhere is done differently, right? And so what happens here in this little section is that it's a free-for-all. And we have to avoid that at all costs. So you are absolutely right. And it depends on how people feel about it. Now, like, it's crazy. The reality is, and that's why I'm gonna go back to driver's education manual. The reality is the state set the policy for how we drive, right? And for the rules and all those other different pieces. And then there was a committee. It wasn't necessarily the people who work at DMV, because they clearly could care less, right? But the folks who wrote that manual were probably not the same people, but I bet some of them were. There has to be procedures. When we skip procedures, it leaves it up to, whatever, it's very loosey-goosey. The way that I've seen a couple of now small districts, not your size, a couple of small districts set the board set the policy. And then there's an additional committee that makes an addendum to the policy that are the procedures. That's a best way, but again, it's a smaller district. So I don't know how WCC's used. I would not just say it's just the superintendent and his staff, but I do think there could be a community because this also helps to break down racism. When we have a group of people who are usually overlooked, especially those who are being greatly affected by the policy, to set the procedures, that's awesome. Then to your point, sir, the practices is where it all breaks down. I'm in my room, I'm gonna do what I wanna do, my door is closed. So this is where accountability happens at the practice level. I'm not sure that's the board issue, but I just want us to know that we have to hold people accountable, and how, the way we do that is to help them with the procedures.
And our
Yeah.
policy would have in it the ability to have the level of accountability.
It can be baked into the policy
Or
for
is it
sure.
baked into the procedure?
It's
Where is
gotta
it
be in the
baked?
procedure.
It has, so if the policy, whatever the ed code says about dress code,
Right.
and then the procedures are, we have a committee, including students, that talk about what the procedure is for our dress code.
Right.
And then we have.
Is that, I'm sorry to interrupt, is that by district or is that by school?
I would assume it'd have to be a district policy, has,
You
because
see what I'm saying?
as students transfer from one school to
This
another.
is, this
school.
is where we have to get granular.
Right.
Mhm.
And then when you get to the practice part of it, that's a site level set of rules
Yes.
that everybody has to follow at that site, because the procedure is a district policy. The district, this is a district policy,
Yes.
here are the procedures,
Yes.
and if you don't follow the practice, going back to the policy, then
Yes.
this is what will happen. to you.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
And then also just to add on what you said, Tracy, before, is that, when you look at all the schools, is everybody doing the same thing, or
Well, that's the
everybody
procedures.
doing what they wanna do? Because every school site is basically doing what they wanna do.
Yeah, I call them the rogues. They're just out in the wild, doing what they wanna do. I watch a lot of Westworld, in case any of you are watching that on HBO. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I agree with you, but that's where the procedures have to stop. So I wanna go back to this driver's education. Let's go to the tax instructions. Okay, so we know the state sets up all the taxes, and the United States sets up all the taxes, and we know we all have to pay them,
Mhm.
right? And there's a long set of procedures,
Mhm.
right? And some of us try and fudge our way past those. And when we do that, we may be okay the first time. But eventually, somebody's gonna call us in back on that policy. And they're gonna pull out the tax instructions, and be like, here's where you were wrong. And then there's a penalty, right? And that's where accountability is. So to your point, I'm not suggesting we become a police state, but it'd be great to have some procedures, because what happens is we often start doing our own thing, and then when our students are harmed, we don't have anything to fall back on because we didn't have those procedures. Even when we have a policy, if we don't have the procedure, we don't have anything to fall back on. So let me give you a really concrete. Sure, I'm gonna say it. I was like, this is still being recorded. So I used to work at ACOE, and my then boss told me, ACOE is Alameda County Office of Ed, and my then boss told me that at my level, I couldn't wear jeans. And I said, is it a policy? And she was like, well, no, but we just, at this level, you don't wear jeans. I said, show me the policy. And let me be clear, if I'm going to an office wearing jeans, I was appropriate, but still, I was like, where's the policy? There was no policy, but it was a practice. Right? That somebody talks to somebody in somebody's ear, and somebody else was like, girl, don't wear jeans. No, you don't wear jeans. No, we don't, right? And there was a practice, but it wasn't a policy. I got there new. I said, where is it in anything that I got in my employment contract? Where does it say that there's a dress code that does not involve jeans? There was no policy, nor was there a procedure of how to deal with that. Therefore, I could walk in there in jeans if I darn well wanted to, right? The practice, though, was part of the culture.
And that's where we get in WCCU.
And that's where everybody, not just
Always
WCCU.
done it this way.
Yes.
This is how it always.
It becomes part of the culture. The only way to shift that is to go back to the policy and then have a procedure. Because then otherwise we get to go, has they said so? Has they told me so? Because this is why we do it. Because the teacher that we love has been here for 30 years and we love her and she said so. That's not equitable. That's not justice. Yay. All right, well, listen, thank you so much for walking through that. I have a lot of homework to give you. Oh, I'm past your time. Let me just run past this real quick. Okay, here are your next steps. Board members, I need you to do some reading. I know you're like, I don't have time to read, but the holidays are coming up and, you don't read during the holiday. I need you to read Punished for Dreaming. It is a 2013 book by Bettina Love, whom I, forgive the pun, love. It is the best book around educational policy that I've read because she intersperses, US education policy that,
For everybody.
it's comprehensive over the last like 30 years. She intersperses that with story. So all the other policy books that I've read, it's just like, here's the policy, here's what happened. Here's the policy, here's what happened. She takes you on a journey where she's like, this was the policy, and this is how it affected me or the children around me or what have you. And she humanizes the policy. When she gets to NCLB, we were left behind.
Yeah.
Come on, no child, every child, right? And so, and she doesn't leave anybody out. It's in 2013, she comes from Barack.
Yeah.
She comes from Kamala. I mean, like she is across the board saying this is what it is. This is a necessary thing for anybody who's about policy. So I strongly urge that we read it. Happy to have a board session where we talk about it. It's amazing. Speaking of.
For all the board members.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Speaking of, it's available on Amazon. We need 2 additional sessions and we don't have any scheduled. So we need a session. I would love to do a read over this. I would love to do, it seems like I got some energy about how race started in America, so I would love to do that. And basically anything else y'all want me to do. And it doesn't have to be during the day, it can be in the evening, but we gotta have some more sessions. So at least 2 additional sessions with board. And one of those could be, I could walk you through one of the policies that you're grappling with. So literally whatever you need. Hi, I'm Rochelle, I'm available. Okay, I said we gotta read love. We need to discuss the ways that we center Black and Latinx voices within every conversation. And I know we have 2 student board members. I would love to figure out how we get them more present so that we can hear the different voices, because we often don't hear those voices. I know we're not gonna worry about it, Dr. Hurst, but what are our strategies to engage, even if that means we are having a strategy against the resistance that we know is coming?
Mhm.
Let's not be passive, let's be active. Let's play football. Let's not do what the Warriors do. Let's actually have some defense, okay?
Oh.
So, I'm just not gonna walk up and just hit a 2 and then walk back, right? Let's actually have some defense going on, okay? And then let's start to look at the strategies and the norms by which we're gonna engage as board members in brave conversations, which means we have to be willing to be uncomfortable and that can not always feel good. So these are concrete next steps. I'm gonna send this to you. I guess I'm gonna send it to you, Genesis, and then you can send it out to everybody. I need y'all to be on this. And then let's do some work. Yeah, I'm excited about it. Yeah, thanks so much, y'all. And here's my contact information in case you need to contact me.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. I can't believe I got that done. That was fun.
Okay,
Thank you.
our next scheduled board meetings this Wednesday at La Mañana John. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We can close the room.